class never, একটা পর্যন্ত class? Okay, thank you. Doesn't really feel like a class, that's the problem. আমার নাম হচ্ছে শ্যামল চৌধুরী. This is me. আমি সিডনি ইউনিভার্সিটিতে পড়াই. Okay? So আপনাদের সাথে একটু পরিচিত হয়ে নিই, তারপর সুবিধা হবে এই জন্য. আপনারা 30 সেকেন্ড আপনার নাম বলবেন, আপনার ব্যাকগ্রাউন্ড বলবেন. Okay? Starting from you. Yeah. বসে বলবেন, বসে বলেন. মোস্তফা কামাল, আপনার ব্যাকগ্রাউন্ড ইকোনমিক্সে পাস করেছেন কোন ইউনিভার্সিটি থেকে? আপনার নামটা বলেন. ওকে, বিজ্ঞান ও প্রযুক্তি বিশ্ববিদ্যালয় থেকে অর্থনীতিতে পড়াশোনা করেছি, এখন এখানে মাস্টার্স. ওকে, কোন ইউনিভার্সিটি? এটা কোথায়? আচ্ছা, সরি আমি জানি না, সরি ফর মাই ইগনোরেন্স. বিবিএ ফাইন্যান্স. ইমন মাহমুদ, বরিশাল বিশ্ববিদ্যালয় থেকে ইকোনমিক্সে গ্র্যাজুয়েশন করেছি. বরিশাল. ইমন, আমি বরিশাল ইউনিভার্সিটি থেকে ইকোনমিক্সে বিএসএস করে এখানে মাস্টার্স করেছি. আপনি তো বসছেন না? আপনি বসছেন? ওকে. আমার নাম সালাউদ্দিন, আমি ঢাকা ইউনিভার্সিটি মাস কমিউনিকেশন এন্ড জার্নালিজমে মাস্টার্স করেছি. আমার ব্যাকগ্রাউন্ড নাই, আমি ইকোনমিক্স রিপোর্টিং করি. নামটা একটু আবার বলুন. রাইসেল. ইকোনমিক্সে ব্যাচেলর করেছি. আমি বিদায়, আমি পেন স্টেট ইউনিভার্সিটি. আপনি বলুন. Sure, thank you. উন্নয়ন অধ্যয়না. ম্যানাস কোন ইউনিভার্সিটি থেকে? Okay, thank you. So আপনার ছোট গ্রুপ, that's good. আমি actually I'm not feeling very well with these things, but I'll manage. Okay. So আমরা আজকে যে বিষয়টা নিয়ে কথা বলবো, I'll be talking in mixed language. আপনারা সবাই তো বাংলা বুঝেন, so I'll be doing both. Okay. So I'll be talking about psychology of poverty. Okay? So psychology of poverty and economic development. How many of you are familiar with this idea, concept of psychology of poverty? এর আগে শুনেছেন? আপনি শুনেছেন? Okay. Anyone else? আপনি শুনেছেন? Anyone? আপনারা সবাই শুনেছেন psychology of poverty. Great. So okay. So how many of you know about the concept of poverty trap? Poverty trap. আপনারা শুনেছেন সবাই poverty trap? Good. So poverty trap এর আইডিয়াটা কি? Can you tell me, anyone? Can anyone tell me what is the idea of the poverty trap? Anyone? Any volunteer?
Already poverty trap. যদি enough income generate না করতে পারে, তাহলে তার যে ফ্যামিলি আছে তার সে সাফিসিয়েন্ট ফুড প্রোভাইড করতে পারবে না, বা যে ধরনের এডুকেশন তাদেরকে দেওয়া, পোভার্টি থেকে এলিভেট হওয়ার জন্য যে ধরনের আসলে হেল্প বা সাপোর্ট একটা ফ্যামিলিকে দেওয়া.
Right, good. So what is the classic reference? So আপনি একটা ইকোনমিক্স এর পেপার বলেন যেটা পভার্টি ট্র্যাপ নিয়ে শুরু করেছে, the idea of this poverty. What is the paper? Who has come up with that idea? What is the seminal paper in this area? No idea? Okay. Have you heard the name of the paper by it sounded common to it. So have you heard the name of paper by Dasgupta and Ray, published in EJ 1986? Everybody's good. Okay. এই পেপারের নাম শুনেছেন? Dasgupta and Ray, Partha Dashgupta and Debraj Ray wrote a paper published in Economic Journal in 1986. They actually formalized the idea of this poverty trap. Okay, so the main idea of the poverty trap is very, very simple. Yeah? So think about it. So this is okay, it's not working. It's fine. So think about this. No. Okay. I'll try now a different color. Yeah. So this is that's better. Okay. So think about this works. Okay. Think about the input. Okay. So how much we are taking as input. Okay. In the morning, let's think about in the morning what you guys have done. You have taken breakfast, right? So let's say for the whole day you have taken some meal, right? So that meal is, think about it is XT. Okay. XT is the total amount of food you have taken in a given day. Okay? Total amount of food. And then, so what is the use of that food? What do you do with that food? What is the main use of that? So it converts into calorie, right? Okay. And how do you use our calorie? No, but what is the main use of our calorie? So the first thing that we do is called resting metabolism. Okay. So resting metabolism. Irrespective of the fact that whatever you do, we need some calories just to survive, right? Even if we don't do anything, our body needs some calories, right? So this is called the need for the resting metabolism. Okay. And then after that, whatever is left, what we can use to produce some output, right? We can use to produce some output, right? Now think about that. We have taken 2,000 kilocalories in a given day. Okay? And what is the resting metabolism on an average? Do you know the amount of kilocalories we need for resting metabolism? Is about 1,400. Okay, 1,400. How much is left? 600, right? So this 600 we can use for different purpose to do different activities, right? So if I am an agriculture worker, I need perhaps more, right? Than if I work as a computer operator, right? Or if I lecture. So I might need more. Now, if I have taken just this, then my body is going to maintain, right? Whatever I'm taking and whatever I'm spending are equal, right? So my body would not change, isn't it? So my capacity to work would not change. Make sense? You guys have heard about those concepts, right? Yeah. Now think about the similar concept. Okay. So one of the ideas of psychology of poverty trap is that we also have limited amount of cognitive resources or brain power. This is also limited. So if you spend more on something, so let's say this is fixed, we cannot change that. Okay? But if you need more of this thing, and if you don't have enough of it, then you will be in a deficit, right? So if you remember Debraj Ray and Dashgupta and Ray, they have another term. What is the term? This is the balance, okay? Energy balance. So this is the energy balance equation, and this is the surplus or deficit, okay? So if you need this much energy in a given day, if you consume more, if you take more, what is going to happen? You will have some surplus, right? You'll have some surplus. If you keep taking that, what is going to happen? You will become obese, right? So you will become obese. But if you keep taking less and less of that, what is going to happen? Yeah, you'll be sick. You won't be able to work, right? But if you cannot work, you need actually more of the energy, right? And you don't have it. So if you cannot work, so if you do physical work, of course, you need more of this thing, but because you can't work, you can't generate income, you are in a trap, right? So that's the idea of the physical poverty trap. Very similar idea of psychological poverty trap. We'll be talking from the cognitive perspective to start with. There would be some of the ideas to test them. Do you know how to test these things? So, this kind of poverty trap, the idea of the poverty trap. How to test it empirically? If we want to test empirically, how do we test if there is a poverty trap or not? Okay. So, sorry? Anyone?
I'm saying you need the empirical data.
No, but that's very general. Okay. So what kind of data you need? So what you need, so if you remember, sorry? So if you remember the Dashgupta and Ray, so they have something called a capacity curve. You remember that? Anyone have seen capacity curve? Capacity curve? No? Okay. Capacity curve. Okay, what is a capacity curve? Okay. Capacity curve is a very simple idea. Okay. So what is your capacity? So let's say this is the food intake. Okay. The food that you are taking. Okay? Right? In a given period of time. And this is your work capacity. Okay? Work capacity. So your work capacity at the beginning, your work capacity, you keep taking food, your work capacity does not increase much, right? Do you see that? It's not increasing, it's flat. Why? Exactly, because most of the stuff that you are taking is going to the resting metabolism. Only once your resting metabolism has been satisfied, you'd be able to use for work, right? Now, so that means what? So initially, you would not be doing much. So once your intake is here, then your capacity, all the things from here, whatever you do, it contributes more to your work capacity. What is the slope of that thing? It is increasing at a very increasing rate here, right? So you need to look at how our capacity changes, how our capacity changes when we increase our food intake. There will be one way of thinking about it, isn't it? If you want to test if there is a poverty trap or not. Second thing is to think about how people spend their income. Okay. So what this kind of people will do, those who are here, what are they going to do? If they're here, so if they're consuming less of this thing, what are they going to do if you give them more income? What are they going to do? They would spend all of their money on spending on food, right? So we can see how people spend their money when their income increases, right? So we need these two kind of data, okay? Then we can look at the elasticities and multiply them, okay? If you multiply them, and if you find the product of these two elasticities is positive, then you can say there is a poverty trap, okay? So this is something one can test empirically, right? Now, if the problem is the psychological poverty trap, what we need to do? If the issue is with the cognition, what we need to do? So this is something we'll be talking today, okay? Right. So I think I'm spending too much time. I'm thinking that I have 3 hours, which I don't, right? Okay. So here is the thing that we want to do today. So it's a long table of contents. So basically, I'll be starting with understanding the concept of psychological poverty traps. We'll talk about exploring the effects of poverty on various behavioral outcomes and some policy. Okay? Right. I gave that list to you. Have you read any of the papers? Two. Which one? First two. Okay. You read the first one and the second one. প্রথম দুটো পড়েছেন আপনি, রাইট? ওকে। আর কেউ কিছু পড়েছেন? প্রথম দুইটা আর কেউ পড়েছেন? No. Okay. Okay. So, right. What I'm going to do, I'll be talking some of them, some of those papers, but I'll not go very in depth. So one of the papers that you should read, if you are interested, you should read this paper, huh? Haushoffer. So this is one of the papers, and Ernest Fair, he's a supervisor. So they are the one who started this idea of psychology, the psychology of poverty, okay, or the psychology of poverty. It's highly cited paper published in Science. So as you can see, so this is in the cross section of economics and psychology. Okay, some of you might have studied psychology, part of it, right? So you might know more than me. I do part of it, I do a little bit of it, but not a lot. So this one is an empirical test of it. This one is also an empirical test of it. Okay? The first one. So this is the first paper that talks about testing that empirically. Remember, I talked about we need to test the cognitive thing, right? Cognitive thing. So this is the first paper that really looked at the cognitive stuff. And there is a paper, there is a book chapter which is interesting. Many of the things I'll be talking from this book chapter too. Okay? Right. Okay. So I started with that thing. So that the idea that so the main idea of this poverty trap coming from Deshgupta and Ray published in Economic Journal is there. And then there is another paper by Banerjee and Mulayanathan came out in AEA PNP. And of course, there is another paper on by Carr et al. I'm going to talk about the last one. Okay. So think about the poverty itself might be taxing on our brain. Okay, so that's the idea here, and that might lead to economic behavior that is very difficult to escape. So why? So you are familiar with the idea of risk aversion. Okay, so what is the risk aversion?
Trying to avoid the
Is there anyone else who can tell it more precisely? What is the risk aversion? The idea of risk aversion. So anyone else? So why risk aversion is a problem? What is the idea of the risk aversion? So think about, so there are two equally weighted payoffs. Okay? So one is probabilistic, another is certain, right? And the expected value of them are exactly the same. Okay? So there is no difference. Now, if I am risk averse, then what I'm going to do? Which one I'm going to take? Certain one, right? Which one is certain? And now it is possible, if this is the case, it is possible to reduce that payoff to a level when I'm going to accept a much lower payoff than a payoff which is equivalent but probabilistic, right? So that means I am willing to live a life which is less than what I could have achieved. Does it make sense? So that's the problem with risk aversion, right? I'm going to avoid risk. So many economic activities require some sort of risk taking. Can you give us one example in the context of Bangladesh? Sorry? Sharecropping. What? Share market. Bangladesh share market. No, let's don't talk about it. No. So anything else? What is it?
insurance.
Insurance.
Language.
Climate insurance. Okay. Why is it? What is the risk there? Is the product available? No.
No, it's not available.
No. So just think about a woman who wants to start a small enterprise. দোকান একটা shop তৈরি করতে চায়, right? একটা shop শুরু করতে চায়. So there is some risk involved, right? So if I'm risk averse, I'm not going to do that, right? That means there was an opportunity that I could take and earn some money. So that means I'm not earning that money means I'm remaining poor, right? So that's why risk aversion is problematic. Whether I'm going to send my child to a school or not, risk aversion can affect it negatively, right? What is the certainty of that? If I send a child to a school, what becomes probabilistic? What is the probabilistic thing? His future return, right? So he might earn higher than an agricultural worker, might earn higher than an agricultural worker, right? But there is a chance that he might not earn that. He might remain unemployed, right? আপনারা কি গ্রামে গেছেন? হ্যাঁ, গ্রামে গেলে দেখবেন অনেক এখন মাস্টার্স পাস আছে এমনি বসে আছে আনএমপ্লয়েড, রাইট? দেখছেন এটা? অনেক আছে। আমি জাস্ট গ্রাম থেকে আসছি 2 দিন আগে, আমার গ্রাম থেকে। ওখানে ওকে, that doesn't matter. Okay? কিন্তু গ্রামে এখন অনেক আনএমপ্লয়েড আছে, প্লেন্টি, রাইট? মাস্টার্স পাস করে বসে আছে। তো ওরা 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 কি করতে পারতো যদি পড়াশোনা না করতো? কি করতো ওরা? এগ্রিকালচার ওয়ার্কার হতো, রাইট? ওর বাবার মতো অথবা ওর চাচার মতো ওরকম এগ্রিকালচার ওয়ার্ক। He or she, or mostly he, they could have earned some money, right, as an agriculture worker. But what are they doing now? So their payoff is lower than it would have been if they were agriculture worker. So if I am risk averse, then I'm not going to send my child to school. So that's the problem, right? So risk aversion is a problem. Now, so my example will tell you no why. So it doesn't make sense to send them to school because they are unemployed, right? Then why I'm saying that was a bad decision not to send to school? Why? Because the expected payoff is higher, right? Of education is definitely higher than just becoming a agricultural worker, right? So that's why it is, on an average, it's not a good decision not to send your kid to school, right? But if you're risk averse, you're going to do that. So that's that. So there are a lot of examples. Technology adoption is another example, right? Where risk aversion could be detrimental. Okay. So we'll look at some of those literature here. So what happens due to the poverty? So if I'm poor, what do? I constantly think about many things, right? What are those things? So I need to think about how I'm going to pay my electricity bill, how I'm going to pay my water bill, how I'm going to recharge my mobile. I just requested just 10 minutes ago my friend to recharge my mobile. See, so there's always this kind of worry all the time, right? So what it does, if your cognitive resource is limited, that drains your resources, right? Leaving not enough resource to put on productive use, right? So that might even hamper your productivity. But hold on. So I'm going to put a lot of attention to different things that is not needed, right? But while some of this attention is intentional and productive, much of it is not. Why? Because cognitive capacity is limited. Money-related thoughts take up much of this valuable capacity, and mental bandwidth available for their task is limited, right? So as I said, so if mental bandwidth is limited, then we have a problem, right? So there is a related literature that is coming out on emotional bandwidth, not only mental, also emotional bandwidth, and it will come very soon, I hope. Okay, so what happens? Poverty itself impairs cognitive function among the poor, degrading also the quality of decision making and lowering productivity. Okay, so now, in fact, so one of the things poverty does is poverty actually keeps people alert, okay? In the sense that they always put a lot of attention on many detailed things. Okay? Have you heard the idea of proportional thinking? Proportional thinking. Okay. You have heard the name of Heller, right? Heller, a behavioralist? No. Right. Proportional thinking is an idea. Think about এটা হচ্ছে বিএডিএস, রাইট? বিএডিএস এর পাশে একটা দোকান আছে। সো বিএডিএস না, আগারগাঁও একটা দোকান আছে। ওইখানে I can buy something, a mobile phone, okay? And mobile phone, let's say, cost 2000 টাকা, 2000 টাকা। সো আমি যদি এখানে যাই, I can save, সো এখান থেকে যেতে আমার 30 minutes হেঁটে যেতে লাগে, নাকি এরকম 30 minutes, রাইট? 30 মিনিট লাগে হেঁটে যেতে। সো 30 মিনিট লাগে, এবং ওইখানে গেলে I can save, let's say, $200, 200 টাকা I can save. So এখান থেকে না কিনে আমি যদি আগারগাঁও পর্যন্ত হেঁটে যাই, 30 মিনিট হেঁটে গেলে I can save 200 টাকা। Okay? So let's put it here. Out of 2000, right? 30 মিনিট হেঁটে গেলে। Now, আমি যদি poor হই, and there is another option. I can buy something of similar kind. হেঁটে গেলে, let's say, আমি এটা 400 টাকার মধ্যে একই জিনিস আমি ধরেন আমি যদি এখান থেকে কিনি বিএডিএস এর সামনে থেকে কিনলে 400 টাকা, ওকে, আর আগারগাঁয়ে গেলে 200 টাকাতে কিনতে পারি, এখানে 200 টাকা সেভ। So rich people, how are they going to act? What are they going to do? For the rich people, it has been found they would be going to Agarga, okay, when it comes to this one. When it comes to this one, they would not do that, okay. They will, so they are always involved in proportional thinking. So as a percentage, what is I'm saving, okay, it's much less here compared to there, right? It's 10% versus 50%, right? Poor don't do that, okay. So irrespective of the value of the good, they would be working, okay. So they put much more attention. So you guys are young, so let me give another example. I don't know, so if you drink beer or Coca-Cola, one of the things, let's say you drink something, right? So if you drink next to a beach, সমুদ্র সৈকতে, right? If you are rich, you are willing to pay higher for the Coca-Cola because of the place where you are buying, okay? That's not the case for the poor people. They don't care whether you are offering Coca-Cola in কোথায়, কক্সবাজার অথবা ঢাকার বস্তিতে, they are willing to pay only the same price, okay. So they don't involve in proportional thinking, okay. So that's something good, but again it takes a lot of their mental bandwidth, okay? So that's the problem. Now, so one of the things that they wanted to do, money at all, they wanted to look at if scarcity really hampers cognitive functioning, okay. So how can I do that? So if I ask you, okay, so if I tell you, okay, so all these things are correct, but how can we test it empirically? What, yeah, you read the paper. Okay. Right. Right. So Bangla, so যেটা বলেছে, what happened is that, so think about just before the harvest. Bangladeshe, anyone is from Rangpur area? Nobody. Okay. Sylhet area. Sylhet কে যেন পড়াশোনা করেছে? Okay, Sylhet পড়াশোনা করেছে, good. So সিলেটের অনেক অঞ্চলে, হাওড় অঞ্চলে একটা মাত্র হারভেস্ট হয়. Do you know that? Only one time, right? Just in বোরো ধান, তাই না? বোরো ধান হয়. So only one harvest. So just before the harvest, most people are very poor. They don't have money. Okay? Okay? Now fishing এর অনেকেই এখন fishing এর scope নাই. Of course, fishing is a harvest, but many people don't earn money from fishing. Most people in that area, I know pretty well about that. Okay? Also, even if I'm an agriculture worker, I don't have money because I don't have any work there just before the harvest. So most people are poor, right? Just before the harvest. So the question is, what we should expect in terms of their cognitive functions. Their cognitive functions should go down, right? If this story is true. If scarcity drains your cognitive functions because you are part of the time of the year, you are in scarcity. In other time of the year, after harvest, you are in plenty, right? You have more money, right? So if this is the case, then we can do this kind of experiment, right? That's what they did. So Bangladesh অনেক জায়গায় আখের আছে, আখ হয়. Do you know that? So it's very similar story. So they did in such a setting where they looked at what was happening before and what happened after the harvest, okay, with sugarcane farmers. So sugarcane is very similar product like agricultural produce like rice, and they looked at, so those farmers' income goes down just before the harvest and it increases after the harvest, right? So they wanted to look at their cognitive functions before and after the harvest. Right? So what they found, farmers' cognitive performance right before harvest is significantly worse compared to their performance right after harvest. Okay? So here is the thing that they found. So let's look at that. So they looked at Raven's matrix test. So this is the test for IQ. So they looked at before and after the harvest. So look at the difference, right? It's significantly different. Not only that, their cognitive control was less, okay, as well as yeah, errors that they made before the harvest was much higher, right? So cognitive functions decreased. So this paper was a very instrumental paper in this literature to show the relationship between cognitive functions and scarcity. So so there was another experiment there. What was the other experiment? Since you read the paper, I don't want to put it in the spotlight. Okay? There are two experiments. Huh? No, এই পেপারটাতে দুইটা এক্সপেরিমেন্ট করেছে ওরা। So I'm just reporting once, but there was another one. Okay. Okay. So another one was in New York, okay, with poor people. What they did, they just brought very similar kind of poor people. Who are the poor people in New York? Black people, right? Like, so they are poor people. So they brought them there, and what they did, they asked them to. So they divided them into two groups. And can you induce scarcity? How can you induce scarcity? How? You can rob them, take money, right? So, but in experiment, you can't do it, right? It's not legal. So what can you do? So you can induce thoughts of scarcity, right? That let's say something happened. You have become, so there was a shock, right? You become poor for some reason, right? So financial thoughts. So they induced to one group those financial thoughts, and the other group did not get induced to this kind of thoughts. And they found, again, very similar results. So before we go to the next thing, what is the problem with this thing? So you guys have done some econometrics, right? You have done some econometrics? Okay. So what is the problem with this experiment? Tell me. No. What is the problem? Is there any problem? Sure, but forget about that. So one thing, okay, so yeah, I take your point. There's only one thing. So think about that this is something widely accepted. Let's accept whatever it is. What could be another issue? So what is the identification mechanism here? What is the identification mechanism? How are they identifying it? What is the identification mechanism? How do we identify things in econometrics? So this is called before and after, right? So they observe something before, they observe something after. What is interacting here? The time trend, right? We don't know, right? So before and after. So this is the problem with the time trend. So they can't control for it, right? So that's the huge issue. So this is one of the things, the econometrics, it doesn't work, right? So you can always criticize that. We can't just conduct an experiment and publish now. Nobody will care about it anymore. So if you want to do something like that, it's not going to work. Right? You wouldn't be able to publish it anywhere apart from AFR. AFR. You know what is the AFR? Afghanistan Economic Reviews. I just made it out. So don't try it. Yeah. Okay. Right. So that's the problem. But if this is the case, if they have anything there, if there is any truth there, it's a hugely costly. So the effect that they found are huge, a very large effect. Okay? It's almost like I am intoxicated with alcohol. Okay? So that kind of effect on the level of IQ that they found. Okay? It's a very large effect. So what happens if I'm intoxicated with alcohol? I make a lot of bad decisions, right? So poverty, scarcity can be as bad as intoxication, right? That's very strong effect, right? Oh, I should not touch it, right? Okay. Right. So now let's look at another paper. So this is a much better paper. So this is a recent paper done in India, again in India. Suprit Kaur and co-authors. So they looked at, so আপনারা কি পড়েছেন এই ব্যাপারটা? Anybody? No. Okay. Right. So ওইখানে যেটা করেছে ওরা, they took some workers, right? Those who are paid at the end of the month. Okay. So I do some work and I get paid at the end of the month. Okay. So these workers do some stitching kind of stuff. Stitching of leaves. গাছের পাতা দিয়ে ওরা প্লেট বানায়। গাছের পাতা। It's a very simple kind of task. Okay. But গাছের পাতাগুলো একসাথে লাগিয়ে মানে প্লেট বানায় ওরা। So very simple task. কিন্তু যদি ঠিক মতো না লাগায় তাহলে কি হয়? প্লেটটা হয় না। So if there is an error, it's costly because their output decreases, right? Productivity decreases. So they can measure that. So what they did, so think about that I'm working for the whole month, but I don't get it, right? The money. So I get the money at the end of the month. So the entire month I need to worry about money, right? So I need to borrow, how to finance my household, how to buy food, those kind of worries are there. What they did, they changed the timing. Randomly for some workers, they changed the timing. They paid them earlier. Okay? And other group of workers, the same kind of worker, they were not exposed to that treatment. And then you can compare the difference between the performance of these two groups of people, right? Do we have the same problem that Mani and others had? Mani, Molayanathan and Safir had in this thing? What was the problem we had there? What is the problem? Okay, so the way now development economics works, okay, is you need to think about some theory. What is the concept that you are trying to understand? Then you need to test them empirically, okay? Rigorously, seriously. So what I told that, so one of the idea of psychology of poverty trap comes from the cognitive scarcity, okay? Now I'm trying to understand if there is any empirical evidence to that, okay? So Mani et al. Was the first paper that looked at empirically, okay? But it has issues. What is the issue? It's a before and after kind of stuff, right? They don't have a proper what? Proper control group, right? So that's the problem. This is not the case here, okay? Do they have a control group? Yes, some workers were assigned to earlier payments and some were not. And the assignment was random. So they have a proper control group, right? So there is no after and before kind of stuff. It's a proper RCT. So they can identify the effect of those early payments, right? What they found. So they found large effect. See? So the day after receiving a cash infusion, so early payment, workers are 0.12 standard deviations more productive, okay? Relative to the control group. These gains persist, okay? Sustaining throughout the workday and for the remaining days of the treatment period. So it's a very simple thing, right? Oh, এটা আরেকটু ছোট করা যায় না? আমার নিচে একটা ইয়ে পড়ে আছে। I think I'm missing. কিভাবে এখানে না? Huh? Oh, okay. All right. So what would be the policy implication for this kind of stuff? This is a very simple fix, right? If this is the case, what is a simple fix?
Provide the salary.
Maybe weekly salary. Okay, that could be one. Yeah, that's a good suggestion. What else you can do? So what have they done? They have provided the salary earlier, right? Earlier than. So at the beginning of the week, they provided the salary. Why don't you do it here? Why the garments factory owners don't do that? Do they have any benefit of doing that? No? Of course there is benefit. What is the benefit? They're more productive. Aren't they? They are more productive. So the benefit goes to whom? Goes to the owner, right? Goes to the owner, right? Yeah. So they're more productive and they're making less errors. So their productivity increased. So why don't you do it? What is going to happen? If I'm a garments worker, if you give me early salary, what I'm going to do? I'll just leave. Right? I take the money and go away. So there is some risk involved, right? Huh? Control the lever. So ওদেরকে বেঁধে রাখবো? বেঁধে রাখে বাংলাদেশে এখন? Are you sure? Wow, that's news to me for sure. Garments সেটা এখনো করা যাবে না, foreign buyer there also, so we can't implement that policy. Right. Okay. So let's go to the other one. So we'll be talking about the idea of self-control. Okay? So we talked about cognitive resource. Now we'll be talking about self-control. Okay, how poverty can affect self-control. Are you familiar with the idea of self-control? Self-control. Self-control বাংলা কি? কে জানি বলছেন সাংবাদিকতা করেন? আপনি বলেন। Self-control-এর বাংলা। আত্মনিয়ন্ত্রণ, এক্স্যাক্টলি। আমার তাই মনে হচ্ছে। আমি আজকে self-control নিয়ে কথা বলবো সেমিনার। রাইট, আত্মনিয়ন্ত্রণ। রাইট, সো আত্মনিয়ন্ত্রণের ব্যাপারটা কেন ইম্পর্টেন্ট? self-control ইম্পর্টেন্ট কেন আত্মনিয়ন্ত্রণের ব্যাপারটা? To make regulate. What do you mean regulate decision? No, আমি বলছি self control এর মানেটা কি? What do you mean? একজন পরে, হ্যাঁ? দাঁড়ান, I'll come back. Sorry. Uh-huh. Okay. Okay. So simply speaking, the way I understand about self-control is temptation. Okay? So temptation. So the question is, if I'm poor, do I have more temptation that I'm rich? Okay? So if I see food, okay, do I tend to eat more? আপনারা কি ফ্রি ফুড খেলে কেউ বেশি খান? ফ্রি ফুড পেলে, হ্যাঁ? Right? We do that, right? Now, if I'm hungry, what do I do? If I'm hungry, what do I do? I might even do more, right? Right? Because I'm not sure if I'm going to get where the next meal is going to come from. Now, also think about savings kind of decisions. Okay? If I cannot control myself, if I would like to spend all the money that I have, what is going to happen? I'll not have any savings, right? If I don't have any savings, I'll not have enough investment, right? So self-control has a lot of consequences. If you have not heard about Erickson and Leibson, have you heard about Leibson? Huh? So they have a review paper on the idea of time preferences. So these guys are one of the pioneers of the idea of time preferences. So here we would be talking about very general way of thinking about self-control. So how do we measure it? Okay, so that's why I'm talking about that thing. So one way of measuring self-control would be giving some. So let's say, so here is a period t here, and here is a period t plus 1. Okay? And you can get some amount, let's say y, and you can get some amount y t plus 1. Okay? So think about, I offer you this thing that you can take y today, or you can wait and take yt plus 1, which is larger than y, in t plus 1 day. Okay? Let's say in 10 days, in 1 month, or 3 months, okay? Or in 1 year. So I can, yeah. What? This is larger than this one, right? And this period is a later period. This is an earlier period. This is a later payment. This is an earlier payment. So earlier payment is smaller. If I wait, oh right. Sure. So yeah. So this one would be the later period. Yes. So it'd be larger. Yeah. Right. So I can always so do for different kind of amount, right? Let's say this is 1, 2, and so on, right? And I can increase this thing. Let's say this is 2, t plus 1. Again, this one is larger than this one, right? So, and I can see when they're switching from here to there, right? So this is one way of thinking of measuring time preferences or self-control. So people, those who don't have any self-control, what are they going to take? They will take the first one, right? So you can actually look at what kind of discount rate they are willing to switch, right? So you're familiar with that idea. Okay, right. So here would be talking about how people, those who are poor, they might behave as if they don't have any self-control. Okay? Scarcity or poverty may make people the way to behave as if they don't have any self-control. Okay? Right. So this is a paper. It's pretty difficult paper. It's a theory paper. So it's a paper in response of another paper. So if you so there was one paper in 2009 written by Banerjee and Mulayanathan about the behavior of poor people. So if you look at the poor people, so they often, they have background in India. So in India, many poor people drink a lot. Okay? So I have seen one study where rickshaw pullers spend 50 to 60% of their money on drinking alcohol. Okay? It's a big problem. So many poor people in Bangladesh used to smoke a lot. I think the smoke has gone down, right, in Bangladesh, but they used to smoke a lot. They used to spend a lot of their money on smoking. So why people do that? So there are two things they talked about, okay, for self-control. So one could be internal psychological mechanisms, okay, and another is externally enforced commitment. So this thing that we talked about, that I offer you two options. You can get something today, let's say 100 taka, or you can wait 1 month and I give you 110 taka. This is a commitment kind of device, right? It's the externally enforced thing. Or you can think about that you have an internal mechanism for self-control. For many people, so this one is also important, internal self-control, right? So people, those who are in difficult circumstances, okay, for them, it might not make sense for some people to impose that thing, internal psychological mechanism. Why? Let's say if I am very, very poor, how much I can save? What is the maximum I can save? What is the amount I can save for anybody? How much you can save? What is the maximum amount you can save? Sorry? Doesn't matter. If you're the richest person on earth, how much you can save? Sorry? Your income. Your limit is your income, isn't it? You can't save more than your income. So if I am very poor, let's say if I earn only $1 a day, how much I can save? $1 a day, right? That might not give me anything, right? So then I might make a decision that I don't save anything because it is rational not to save, right? Because it will not make any difference in my life. So, but that will, from our side, you might say that I don't have any self-control. I'm not saving anything. But it is a rational decision, right? For me, not to save, right? So this is one of their focus. Now, the same person, me, if you make me rich, okay, for some reason, let's say I get a lottery, or I get money from TUP, TUP, Targeting Ultra Poor Program from BRAC. TUP, have you heard the name TUP? Targeting Ultra Poor. So that gives some asset transfer program, right? You have never heard about it? Okay, so TUP, Targeting Ultra Poor program, is one of the most known poverty alleviation program in the world. Okay, started by BRAC. So what they do, they transfer asset, the very, very poor people. It's a guru day. Okay? Now think about that person would not be able to save for a cow in their entire life had they saved. But now all of a sudden, you have this asset. You have become rich. They change their behavior. Now they have, as if they now have self-control. They're not saving more. Okay? So this is the interesting part of this. Okay? So if you are rich, these people don't become rich, but richer than they were, right? So at a certain level of income, it makes sense. Only at a certain level of income, it makes sense to save. At a lower level of income, it doesn't make sense to save. The idea of the typical poverty trap. Remember, what is the idea of the typical poverty trap? The classical poverty trap. How does the poverty trap, how does the curve look like? Do you remember the S-shaped curve? S-shaped curve, right? So this is it, right? It's a very similar idea. Right, so this is it, no? So here's the S-shaped curve, right? So this is asset today, and asset tomorrow, right? So, right? So if I am here, it doesn't make sense. If I am below this place, it doesn't make sense for me to save because I will come back here, right? If I'm here, then it makes sense to save, right? So that was also the idea of this big push theory, right? Then just push people here. TUP is one of those programs that tries to do that, right? So all the person here might look, they don't have any self-control because they're not saving anything. But it is a rational decision for them to smoke, to drink, because it would not make a difference. They will always be here, right? So that's the idea of this paper. It's an interesting paper. If you have time, you can read it, but it's a bit also a difficult paper. Okay? No, it's not. It's not self-control developed করার কিছু নাই. Okay? It's basically an internal mechanism. Okay? It's an internal mechanism. It's a rational decision in this model, not to say. Okay? And, so here is it. Huh? So look at the current asset and the continuation asset. So these are some simulation results. Okay, these people are not econometricians; they're theorists, and they had okay. In the time preference literature, okay, so there are two discount rate, right? So two parameters. The paper we talked about at the beginning, okay? Here. So there are basically two parameters, okay? I'm not sure if you're familiar with the beta delta model. Are you familiar with the beta delta model? No. The beta delta model. So beta is the temptation part, self-control part, okay? And delta is the discount rate, okay? So here they assume different values of beta and delta. Delta is pretty high for them. So beta is something always very, very high, close to 1, 0.8 or 9, okay? And they similar that. So I'll not go to the details, but just look at, so this is very similar idea here. So this is this 45-degree line. So if your asset level is below this, it doesn't make sense to save. Only after this level of asset, you start to accumulate. So if the same person, if we can push them out of this place to here, the person will start savings as if the person has gained self-control. But it's not that behavior changes because self-control is very difficult to change self-control. This is what I'm going to talk today in our seminar. Okay? It's very difficult. But what happens is that in this place, if you have a higher asset, it looks like as if now you have more self-control. Okay? So there are two ways of doing it. What people do, people often offer some commitment device. Those who have self-control problem. What is a commitment device? Commitment device is that আপনার NGO সম্বন্ধে জানেন যে বাংলাদেশে অনেক MFI আছে, MFIs, they offer some commitment devices. What would be one commitment device for savings? That you save with us, but you cannot withdraw it. Okay? You save every week 10 টাকা। মাইক্রোফিন্যান্স করে না 10 টাকা সেভ করে না 10 টাকা 20 টাকা সেভ করে, হ্যাঁ? 10 টাকা 20 টাকা এরকম 1 টাকা বা 10 টাকা সেভ করে, but you cannot withdraw it. You can withdraw it after a certain time or certain amount you have accumulated. What is one of the ideas? Okay, so economists, theoreticians look and observe and come up with some underlying theories, right? So this is one of the theories. So if your asset is here, then you don't have any problem. Then you can get your money because you are already here. Why? Why this is an interesting idea? Why? Because self-control, if you don't have self-control here, it's costly for you. How is costly? If you don't control yourself here, you'll be poor, right? Self-control is very costly here, not having self-control. It's not costly here. It doesn't make any difference. I drink or not. My savings remain low. My state doesn't change. Only here it becomes costly because if I fall back, I become very, very poor. here I remain at a good shape, right?
How to decide the threshold level of assets?
How to decide? So as I said, you need to understand the idea of this. What would be the, so these are simulation. Okay? So those would depend on many things, many ideas. So here, so they simulated based on some level of income, some level of risk aversion, some level of discount rate, and present bias. What the shape would look like. Okay? So just to generate some interesting results. Empirically, that this has not been tested directly. There is a paper. There is a paper. If you're interested, I can refer it to you. So the paper is written by Balboni et al. Came out 2013 in QJE. No, 2022 in QJE. Okay. So this is the direct test of poverty trap based on TUP data from Bangladesh, based on TUP data from BRAC data. This came out in QG. So if you're interested, you can look at the paper. So they tested that some people, not exactly this model, but some people, due to TUP, this asset transfer, some people are able to go beyond that threshold, beyond here, okay, beyond here, and they're the one who escape poverty. They don't look for self-control, but what they look at, that is there asset level in Bangladesh that pushed people out of poverty. Okay? So that's what they find. Right. No. So threshold varies. Okay? So what they do, they look at some eligibility. So if someone is poor or not, those kind of stuff. But so the asset, so okay. So if you think about in econometrics, how we can think about it, right? So what we want to understand, we want to understand the level of asset. Your question is like this. So we want to know. So let's say this is poverty trap. Okay. So let's try to estimate the poverty trap, right? What is the poverty trap? So poverty trap, so someone is in poverty trap or not, right? And I want to estimate that with this thing. Okay. Let's say I want to estimate an asset threshold, right? Asset threshold, and then there is this EI. Okay. All those things are there. Now I want to estimate what is the asset threshold, right? What can I do? So I can give different people different amount of assets, right? That did not happen in TUB. That did not. So they gave same amount of asset. What was the difference? Yeah, some came out of poverty trap and some did not. But what you can do, you can go back and exploit the heterogeneity. The people, those who received those assets, they were not homogeneous because it's not AI generated people, right? So these people are different. They have different amount of assets to start with. So that created some variation here. Okay? From that variation, you'd be able to generate that thing, right? Now this asset transfer has other components too, right? Not only asset, you might also want to look at their human resource. Right? So this variation also comes from there, right? So combined with that, they find that there is a certain level of asset. If you reach that level of asset, you can get out of poverty. So that's their idea. Yeah? Make sense? But this is an RCT. It goes down through an RCT, so it's quite identification is quite clean. But the paper has a problem. I'll not talk about that one because this is not very relevant. Yeah. Well, any paper we find problem, right? That's the beauty of economics. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let's look at the implication. I think I'm running a bit. Okay. You guys are feeling to take a break, or we should continue? Okay, let's continue, right? Because 2 hours, so yeah, should be fine, right? Right. So here, as I talked about punishment, so self-punishment is important mechanism here. So we talked about asset and self-control. So one thing would be, so that talk about credit. Another thing could be also to, so we talked about asset, we can also think about giving credit, right? So giving them, instead of giving them small amount of credit, give them large amount of credit, right? Instead of giving them 100 taka, also $100, give them $1,000. what is going to happen? Those who don't have self-control. Those who have self-control, you don't observe in this model, you don't observe if someone has self-control or not, right? Ex ante. You observe that only ex post, right? What is going to happen? Those who don't have self-control, no, they would consume it. They would be in debt trap, right? Now, not only in poverty trap, also in debt trap, right? So that qualification is there. But some people would be able to escape poverty, right? So that's one of their implications of these things. So they also talked about why commitment device doesn't work and some other ideas. Let's move on. Here we'll look at another idea of through an experiment about the idea of self-control, whether people can control. If, remember, what is our focus? Our focus is scarcity. Focus is poverty, right? Whether that can increase or decrease your self-control, right? That's what we want to do. Whether scarcity or poverty increases or decreases your self-control, right? If this psychology of poverty is true, scarcity would be another area, another scarcity has another implication that it reduces self-control. Okay? So this is what they wanted to look at. Okay? So effects of poverty on impatience, whether somebody becomes impatient. So remember we talked about these things. So here they mix patience and self-control together. Okay? They don't make a distinction. There is some distinction. So one needs to think about that they are not the same thing. So self-control is the beta part of beta delta model. Impatience, the delta part of beta delta model. Yeah. Sounds boring, I know, if you don't know about the models. So one thing is, what happens is that if you want to consume immediately, so this is the beta part, okay? And delta part is so the discount rate, the long-term discount rate, okay? So what is the discount rate at which you will be saving? So okay, the long-term discount rate. Okay? So that is, but they mix this up, and many people do that, but that's fine for this purpose. But let's think about patience and self-control are very similar idea, and they are closely related, not exactly the same. Okay? So what they did in this thing, so they conducted a lab experiment in Uganda. Okay? So the idea was sorting beans and earning some money, and then you can at the same time you allocate entertainment. Okay? Whether you want to consume entertainment in 2 weeks' time or 3 weeks' time, some entertainment. Okay? Now, so if you wait, you can consume more. Instead of, so this is the conversion rate. So this is actually, if you should consume earlier, you should be you should not have you should be indifferent. You should consume later, because for 1 unit, if you wait, you can consume 1.25 units in the future. If you for some of the rates, you can get 1.5, 50% more if you wait, right? So patience pays more here. So that's what they wanted to look at. Now they wanted to see a situation where you make the same decision twice. Okay? One, in the first week, about week 2 and 3, and again in week 1, about again the same decision. Okay? So let's look at what happens. So they wanted to manipulate poverty-related concerns, right? So you can't make people poor or rich in lab, right? In a lab, you can't do it, right? Poor or rich. You can give them some money, but what they did, so they manipulated their concerns about poverty, okay? So it's called poverty priming. So there are 2 kinds of conditions, hard condition or mild condition. Okay? So think about that. If you go to, again, thinking about Rangpur area, you go there and you tell 4 people that in the lab, some people that manga is coming. You know manga? Manga is coming, okay? So that would be something a shock, right? So, sorry? No, but let's say, okay, but Monga chilo, right? Actually, chilo. So I don't want to be political, but the question is, think about that. Okay, some people are saying that in the lab, so these guys are assigned, and you guys are told that randomly assigned and told that Monga would be there this year. Okay? So that is a concern, right? All of a sudden, it's a kind of shock, and you guys are told, oh, the year is going to be fine. So you are under not much stress, and you want to see the difference. Plus, they also did some calorie intake, so some sugar drink. So to remember, we talked about Dashgupta and Ray, the idea of the calorie, but they also implemented that. So what they found. So here is the substitution rate, and here is the allocation. Okay? So that means look at the willingness to accept kind of thing. So here is the how they are between hard. So these are the two different priming. So hard poverty rate versus easy poverty priming. Okay, so and they want to see how much you're allocating earlier date versus a later date, right? So at a low substitution rate, they are putting more entertainment in the earlier date than the later date. As the substitution rate increases, that means you can get more and more if you allocate at the later date. So they are allocating less in the entertainment in earlier date, right? So you see a downward sloping demand curve, which makes sense, right? And you can also see that hard, so there is a difference between hard and not so hard, easy thing. So if you're on, but they're behaving very similar way. Okay, so what they found? So they found some inconsistency. In week 1, subjects allocated 1.2 minutes less entertainment for the earlier session than when facing the same decision in week 2. Okay, that means the same decisions when they are taking in week 2, they are allocating more for the earlier time than the same decision when they took in earlier time. Okay, so there is some inconsistency. Okay, so calorie doesn't make a difference here in this setting. Okay, and they also did not find any link based on direct measures of attention. So these people did not have any attention problem. What happened? So poverty prime. So the main difference came from the effect of poverty prime on discounting is driven by the choice in decision situations in which earlier consumption is more tempting. So people, those who are in the hard priming, they were allocating more for the earlier time. Okay? So they had less self-control. Okay? So poverty did affect, in this setting, poverty did affect self-control. So if you are exposed to the idea of poverty, then you want to consume earlier. Okay. Now, what is your take of this paper? Right.
Some positive thing. So this probably their decision about the control is also changed. Say for example, because it is running a meat for sure.
I don't know.
We are really across the 300 unions in Bangladesh. They are converting their cells into productive cells. So once you talk with them, you'll see they are now psychologically they are feeling much better that they can do something.
So, but that's you're talking about the confidence. I'm talking about self-control. So there is a difference. Okay, so let's focus on self-control.
Okay? Self-control can also be changed by gene spectrums, like
Sure.
giving them something a chalk.
Yep. I don't know. So it seems poverty itself. So the question is, I think if I understood correctly, so if you make them richer, whether their self-control increases, right? Yeah, yeah. So it's kind of well, making the environment richer, for instance. Yeah. So that's what one of the things that we talked about in the previous paper, right? The previous theoretical paper, that if you make them richer, then yes, you can. So if you make them richer, then it will look like as if their self-control has increased. But why this has happened, we don't know, right? It's due to the internal mechanism, or they already had self-control. Yes, yeah, but we don't know the mechanism. So it's not that we are changing their self-control. What we are doing, we are observing as if they are now exerting more self-control. Okay? So not sure, but my question here is not on that. So my question here is that on this thing, what they have done, they have induced some ideas of poverty. Okay, and they found that if you make them poorer, if they have more thoughts about poverty, their self-control decreases. So that's the idea. Okay? So that means there is a one-to-one link between the thoughts of poverty and the reduction in self-control. So remember what we try to establish here. Everything that I'm trying to do is establishing some causation. Okay? Can we say causally that poverty increases decreases self-control or not? Okay? Now, you cannot expose people to poverty, right? Can you? Can you take their cows? No, right? You can't do that, right? And so you can't do it randomly, right? In some places it happens. It's happening in Myanmar, for instance, right? In a war situation. But those situations are not good for research, right? So one thing you can do, you can create a controlled environment. Lab environment. Are you guys okay? Yeah? Okay. So in a controlled environment, what you can do, you can induce this kind of thoughts and see if something happens or not. So this is the beauty of lab. Lab allows you to do that. Okay? So that's the idea. Okay, all right. So we talked about that. So let's look at other effects of poverty. So we don't have a lot of time. Sorry. Yes, I know. That's what I mean, 30 minutes. Yes, it's not a lot of time. Okay. Okay. So one of the things that happens is that poverty may also have other effects. So one of the things is the mental stress. Okay? So poverty and negative income shocks are associated with higher level of stress. Poverty causes negative effect and stress, defined as an organism's reaction to environmental demands, exceeding its regulatory capacity, and that this effect may change people's behaviorally revealed preferences. So if this is the case, then it is a bit problematic, right? So it can cause different things, including excessive amount of drinking alcohol and kind of stuff. So this kind of mental stress idea, we know that, right? That people, those who are in poverty, might have this mental stress issue, right? They are under higher mental stress. So we conducted a survey for a different purpose on mental health. Okay? And we found in Bangladesh, in some rural areas, in 4 districts, we found that about 30% of the people, 30%, more than 30%, the people have mental health issues in Bangladesh. 30%. It's a very significant amount, right? Very significant number. Not all of them are poor, and we don't know whether this is due to that, but this is a huge issue, right? We don't have that thing in Bangladesh, not that much, but we do see some extreme example, right? Some people when they're stressed, they often go and smoke, right? Or sometimes they do consume excessive alcohol, right? But they cannot correct. It's a very good question. So one thing would be that they most likely they don't have enough cognitive capacity to think anymore, because the stress, again, if the cognitive resource is limited, and if they're under stress, they can't make rational decisions, right? So they end up doing something. Or mental health. Right. No, sure, that could be one thing. That's a good point. That might be the case, but we're not talking about that one. That this is again a very good example actually. So because they are poor and that they are controlling in indirect way, right? Their poverty. They're thinking that okay, this might be one of the ways of dealing with it. That could be something. Yeah, but also another other idea of this stigma, shame, social exclusion. আপনারা কেউ স্কুলে গেছেন তো রাইট অলমোস্ট সবাই না ইউনিফর্ম নাই এরকম স্কুলে গেছেন ইউনিফর্ম ছাড়া ইউনিফর্ম না পড়ে ইউনিফর্ম পড়া গেছেন নাকি ইউনিফর্ম ছাড়া স্কুলে গেছেন সবাই ইউনিফর্ম দ্যাটস ফাইন অনেক স্কুল আছে ইউনিফর্ম নাই না ইউনিফর্ম থাকে না রাইট আমি যে স্কুলে গেছি ইউনিফর্ম ছিল না so you can identify yes I went to a school that did not have uniform it still doesn't have uniform right so I went to a very poor school okay yeah so that's not a problem that's not a question but there you can actually find out you can easily identify who comes from a poor family who comes from a rich family right that also so there are social exclusion so people those who come from poor family they might be excluded it might also possible that they don't have enough friend so আমাদের এখানে যেটা হতো গ্রামের সবচেয়ে যে ধনী মানুষের ছেলে তার সাথে সবাই ফ্রেন্ডশিপ করছে have you ever observed that opposite happens too right সবচেয়ে গরিব মানুষের যে ছেলে তার সাথে কেউ ফ্রেন্ডশিপ করছে so that's a huge kind of social exclusion and problem so that creates further mental stress right they don't find friends they don't find network all kinds of stuff happen right so it's associated with shame so people often lie that that what they have so sometimes they talk about things that just to hide right because this is not appreciated that I come from a very poor background for instance right so some people feel shamed and yeah and it is often stigmatized so those things again create mental stress and again cycle continues right so if those things also change our behavior our preferences then we have an issues right so if you look at again fraction of present bias in individuals is there an association between poverty and present bias or not right so those are important things we don't know much about them yet but those are the things that we need to look at right so what are the sources of behavioral biases and if poverty is one of them right yeah so the thing that I started with is the idea of this mental health and depression. So if you think about depression is a huge source of inefficiency in the economy, and many people suffer from it. And if you look at how much is the cost to the global economy is 4.4% of world's population suffer from depression. So the clinical depression in Bangladesh it would be about, I think, at least this one, perhaps even more than 4.4%. And we don't have much support, right? On depression. We don't have much mental health support in developing countries, also in Bangladesh. We don't have many professionals to support it. Even if anything, it's stigmatized, right? Depression and mental health issues. So what can we do? So the one question is, if this is so expensive and so problematic, if people come out of poverty, so what happens to their mental health? What do you think? So if we look at these people in TUP, what shall we expect? So their mental health should improve. There should be less incidences of depression, right? Unfortunately, BRAC has not collected a lot of data on depression. They have some data, but not a lot. Okay? And at the time when they started the program, they did not really think a lot about mental health. Mental health is a relatively new issue in economics. However, there was a study done by, again, Haushofer and Shapiro. So what they did, so this is the asset transfer program, right? So there is a parallel silver bullet in poverty alleviation. Okay? So this is called cash transfer. Okay? What is the difference between asset transfer and cash transfer? So the main idea is that asset transfer is that, so it's much more involved, right? you need to give an asset, you need to give a cow to a person, you need to give them other services too, right? So গরু তো ঘাস খায়, ঘাসও দিতে হবে, তাই না? গরুকে কি করে পালতে হবে সেই ট্রেনিং দিতে হবে, right? All those things are involved. So it's a long process. The intervention is very complicated. Cash transfer is very simple. We just give the cash and see what the people do. Okay? So economists, which one they should prefer? Cash or asset? Cash, right? We all prefer cash. Why? Because these people, those poor people, they're rational. They know what to do. We don't have to give them a cow and tell to rear the cow, right? They should know it, and they know it. So there is a parallel trend, and it started with an NGO. It ended up being a very big NGO called Give Directly. Have you heard the name Give Directly? No? It's a big NGO. Okay? So they exactly do the opposite of asset transfer. Okay? Asset transfer is often conditional. Okay? You have to do these things. You have to maintain it. You have to do these things. And this is unconditional. Okay? Unconditional cash. I just drop you some cash and you do whatever you want to do. I don't care. Okay? That's what they do. So they gave quite a bit of money through this NGO, and they looked at, so that was the average amount that they give in terms of PPP, purchasing power parity, 709, right? Okay, in Kenya. And they wanted to look at what happens to the mental health of those people, as well as poverty. Okay? So poverty decreased there, and then look at their mental health. Okay, so their happiness increased by 0.16 of the standard deviation. There's a huge increase in the happiness, right? Their life satisfaction increased, their stress level significantly decreased, quarter of a standard deviation, also depression. Okay? Right? So it's a huge impact of this unconditional cash transfer program, okay? on mental health, right? Uh, why do you care? Why do you care? No, so what do you want to see? No, but no, this is not the objective. What is our objective? No, our objective is to see these poor people come out of poverty. Right. So the question is, if the equivalent amount of money you give in cash versus asset, which is more effective? More effective, right? Cash or credit, or cash and or asset, right? We don't have any study on that case. UBI, Universal Basic Income. Okay, বলেন। কারা করেছে নাম বলেন। Okay, so কেনিয়াতে একটা হয়েছে, ওরা ব্যানার্জিরা করেছে। I'm familiar with the study. Yeah, I know the study, what happens there. In which country? I know the research. Okay. Yeah, so there is not much evidence on that the misuse of cash. Right? So it doesn't really happen. Some people will do it, but the question is, we're talking about the averages. On an average, বাচ্চাটাকে. So we don't have any causal evidence on this kind of stuff. I'm not aware of. I know the literature. So there is no causal evidence. So there might be one Sokina has done that, but Zorina has not done that. Okay, so that's fine. So on an average, they don't do it. Huh? So there are double selection going on there. Double selection. You're familiar with the selection issue. What is the selection issue here? What is the selection issue here? Selection issue. What is the selection here? No. No. So the guy or the lady who came to ask for money is a selected person, self-selected. So it's a different, this is not an average sample. So it's not an average poor person. We can't use this kind of incidences As an example, we need to have proper evidence. That's what we are trying to learn here. We need to establish causality. That's the idea. So this is a causal study. Right? So you take an average poor person in Kenya and you make an new city, and this is the impact you expect on an average. Right? So that's the idea. That's the idea. So there are different questions, and there is also a long-term study done by them. It has not been published. I think it came out in 2001 or 21 or 22. It's not published yet. Right. Okay. Where are we? So I don't want to end with negative things. Let's think about positives now. Okay? Aspirations. Okay? So aspirations and hope. Okay? Now, so what is aspirations? So aspirations are broadly a hope or ambition of achieving something. Okay? So they are different from beliefs. So beliefs are different from aspirations. Who wants to, what do you aspire? Anyone? What is your aspiration? Anybody here who wants to tell us the aspiration? Nobody? What do you want to become? Nothing? The DG or BAD is at first? No? Huh? Environmental economist. He aspires to become an environmental economist, right? So aspirations. So these are aspirations. These are not beliefs about him. This is an aspiration, right? So what I want to become, right? So this is the aspirations. Now, what do you need to do to become an environmental economist? So it is something that you have to study, right? So you have to study environmental economics and this kind of stuff. So the same aspiration, if a poor person has, so that person needs to work much more than him, right? To achieve that thing. To achieve the same level of aspiration, a poorer person needs to work much harder than him, right? So what is going to happen? So if I know that to achieve the same level, I need to work harder, so that might create a disincentive for me, right? Then I am going to adjust my aspiration. Instead of becoming an environmental economist, I might want to become what? Environmental worker, for instance, right? A worker. That might be less effort that I have to exert. So I'm adjusting my aspiration. So that is keeping me at a level lower than my potential, right? So there is, for poor people, there is also a crisis of aspiration. They can't aspire. Right? So that's the rational way of thinking. But also another way of thinking, because they don't know anyone who has become an environmental economist. So when I was in my school, what I wanted to become, what I aspired to, I wanted to become a teacher, a school teacher. Why? So that was the best thing I saw around me, the teacher, right? So that was my aspiration. I wanted to become a primary school teacher. When I went to high school, I wanted to become a high school teacher, right? We have not seen anyone better who has a better job than a high school teacher, right? So that was the limit of my aspiration, right? So that's the idea here. So they have a nice model on aspirational track. So if you cannot aspire, you're not going to exert enough effort. And because you cannot, you are not going to exert enough effort, that can actually reduce your effort level as well as keep you in a kind of poverty trap. Okay? So let's say if everyone around me are poor people, if I live in North Korea, what I'm going to do? North Korea, what I'm going to aspire? Just for the, for the great leader, if I can cheer one time in my lifetime, right? I would remain like that, right? So that's the problem, crisis of aspiration. So here is an empirical evidence. It's a nice paper. So what can you do? How can I, what would be a good study that you want to do to test this thing, that whether you can change, can aspire people? What would be a study? Yeah, we have কেউ নামাজ পড়তে যাবেন? নামাজ কখন শুরু হয়? হ্যাঁ? 1:50. So you guys have time, okay? Right. But if you want to go, yeah, you're free. Because, yeah, you can. Right. So we'll stop in 10 minutes. Okay, so what would be an ideal study? How can you design a study for the aspiration? What you can do? Think about my situation. What you could have done to aspire me when I was in my village. To bring people, those who have achieved higher, who has become an environmental economist, right? Or who has become an economist, right? Like me. Yeah, that would be one way of thinking, right? So in my village, I have started a school. Okay? Yeah. And I have a program to bring people of guys like him. Okay? So in my village, so we now have pretty good role models. Okay? Not me. So there was a guy in National Institute of Mental Health. So he was the director there, okay? National Institute of Mental Health. So there is a lady, there is another guy who was the chairman of a board, education board. Okay? So there are different people who have those who have achieved pretty well, who have done very well, right? So you can bring those people. Why I'm saying not you, but bringing a person from my village? Because they would be able to relate. This guy has started here. He was like me, and he has achieved, right? I should not bring Vinayak there, right? Because he is not from there. They would not be able to relate. So exactly similar experiment they have done in Ethiopia. Okay? That's what they have done. So they have brought people of very similar kind, and those who have done very well, not with the help of NGOs or government, by themselves. Okay? So they brought some role model kind of, some success stories, some role model, right? Some successful model from those areas. And they made those some presentations, okay, there. And look what happened. So those people, those who are exposed, okay, so now they're aspiring much, much more. So this is their level of aspiration. Their aspiration has increased by 0.13 of a standard deviation. Okay? So we can control for, as well as their expectations for the future has improved. Okay, those who got treated by those kind of people, those who have done very well, and they came and gave a talk, right? So it's straight after screening those people. This is after 6 months, and so there is also it's something persisted over time. But most importantly, look at their investment in their children. Okay, so they increase their investment on their children. So children are now enrolling at a much higher rate. So 0.28 of a standard deviation. And their education spending, it's not only enrolling, their education spending has increased substantially, right?
So these people were exposed to this type of.
Right. So again, it's an art city where you take some people, right? You give some randomly send them to a treatment and others not, and then you compare them after some time. Okay? Yeah. So that's what they've done. Yeah. See? So this is a pretty positive story, right? Yeah. So you can aspire people and change their aspiration, but more importantly, I think this part is very interesting, right? It's not only their aspirations change, they are actually spending their money on that, right? Their education of their children and their enrollment of their children, right? Okay, so we are almost at the end. So, right. Your questions and the conclusion. Yeah. So this literature is relatively new. Right? It's not a lot of literature there. We don't have that much work. This is relatively new. But so it is likely that poverty and scarcity are most likely to translate into important real world outcomes, especially if people are not self-aware of such outcomes, right? If they're not sophisticated. So the evidence is, we don't know, no evidence of people's lack of awareness of impacts of scarcity on their cognitive function. Okay? But anyway, questions? Mhm. Yeah. No. So what percentage of poverty could be explained by this kind of scarcity? Right, right, right. No, we don't have the data on that. So what one can do, one can look at, so one way of looking at it would be the way it has been looked at functioning of certain things, right? For instance, on cognitive functioning, right? So the first paper that we talked about on mental health, but decomposing the effects of on poverty of the entire thing would be pretty difficult. Okay? Because you need to think about a model first, okay? What you're trying to estimate. Otherwise, it's very difficult to think. Okay? So, yeah.
আরেকটা জিনিস মানে এটার আমরা একটা বিপরীত চিত্র দেখতে পাই, যেমন একটা কথা আছে যে হার্ড টাইম মেক্স টাফ মেক্স সাকসেস, দেন সাকসেস মেক্স ইজি টাইম মেক্স উইক ম্যান এন্ড দেন ফেল। অর্থাৎ আমরা যদি বাংলাদেশের কিছু এক্সাম্পল দেখি যে অনেক বড় বড় প্রতিষ্ঠান আছে যে একজন ব্যক্তির মানে সাফল্যের কারণে বড় হয়েছে, দেন তার ছেলে মেয়েদের যখন সে ভাগ করে দিচ্ছে সেটা কিন্তু ডেস্ট্রয় হয়ে গেছে। ফর এক্সাম্পল এটার মানে পুরো সেক্টর তো আছে, আমি যখন পলিটিতে আছি তখন কিন্তু আমার মধ্যে একটা যে অ্যাসপিরেশনের যে জায়গাটা, যে না আমি যদি হার্ড ওয়ার্ক না করি আমাকে এই সিচুয়েশনে থেকে যেতে হবে, তখন আমার মধ্যে আলাদা একটা মানে মোটিভ কাজ করে যে না আমাকে ভালো জায়গায় যেতে হবে। যেমন এটা খুবই কম পার্সেন্ট, তারপরে বিভিন্ন যে মেডিকেলের পরীক্ষা তখন যেরকম কিছু গল্প চলে আসে যে বাবা
Okay, good, good. Yeah, I got it. So the second part is a different thing. So I'm much less interested in what happens to the rich people's children. Really, I'm less bothered about it. This is not my area, so they do things they want to do. Okay? Right. So now for the first part, the problem is we don't have that many examples that poor people have done very well. Okay? So these are all incidences. Okay? So it's not, so these are just some cases and examples. Like what we used to say that you don't have to metric pass করার দরকার না রবীন্দ্রনাথ হওয়ার জন্য, right? রবীন্দ্রনাথ নাকি মেট্রিক পাস করে না, that's okay. কিন্তু যারা মেট্রিক ফেল সবাই রবীন্দ্রনাথ হয় না, okay? Almost none of them. So these are exceptions, right? So what we are thinking about when we talk about poverty or any kind of intervention, we talk about an average person, a randomly picked average person. What is going to happen to that person? We're not even talking about the heterogeneous treatment effect. Yeah. Anyone else? Anything? No. Yes.
Very generic question.
Sure.
These 2022, it's also the covered.
Right. Okay. Mm-hmm.
It's
Right. Sure. So okay, so very loaded question. So in terms of the poverty rate, so of course it's a matter of measurement, right? If I just as an observer of Bangladesh, so a person from Bangladesh, I think poverty rate has come down in Bangladesh. So there is no doubt. Huh? is so it is true that poverty rate has come down. Can we say many factors? Yeah. NGO is one of the factors for sure. Government programs. Problem is, again, I'm a micro economist. The problem is who has contributed how much is very difficult to identify. It's extremely difficult. So we would not be able to construct a counterfactual, right? That's very difficult.
Some stuff. I mean,
Yeah. Right. Yeah, so this is, I don't doubt much about the HIS. HIS is usually pretty positive data, pretty good data, but also don't forget that it was conducted into the 2022, right? After COVID. By that time, there was a recovery. Okay? More or less, Bangladesh has recovered from the COVID shock. You'd be surprised in Australia, so where I live, what happened to the poverty rate there during COVID? What do you think?
definitely.
No, the opposite. Poverty rate decreased during COVID, right? Inequality decreased during COVID, yeah, substantially. So that was the only time where inequality decreased, poverty rate decreased.
Inequalities are kept, but the Bangladesh poverty is one.
Right. Yep. So there was a lot of transfer programs from the government. So those transfer programs disproportionately affected the poor people positively. I can share our papers on transfer program, what happened, and how much transfers went to whom, kind of stuff. So we have a paper, just came out in JDS. I'll be happy to talk about it. But সেটা তো poor লোকজন তো ট্যাক্স দেওয়ার কথা না। না, ট্যাক্স দেওয়া তো অনেক পরে আসে। So net taxpayers, even in Australia, net taxpayers on the top 50%, and bottom 50% do not pay any tax. Now, if the poverty rate is 10%, indirect tax, so সেটা তো different ব্যাপার. Indirect tax is a different thing. Of course, everybody is paying it. Right, indirect tax বাড়ছে। কিন্তু that's a different thing, right? Most of the tax comes from the top 10%. Those rich people pay most of the taxes, right? 90% of the tax comes from here. And that's almost in any country. Okay? Yep.
Like if I may, এই ধরনের কোনো সেই ক্ষেত্রে কমিউনিটি
I don't know. So my answer would be I have no idea. So usually the kind of things that we talk about is we focus on individual and households, not community. And communities are often heterogeneous, right? So that's a big issue. So it's that could be public good kind of provision, but not enterprise. The community level is very difficult to run. Russia tried, China is trying, but China is a different story. Sure. What? Daud Kandi? Sure. Oh, I don't know, but okay. That sounds very good. But yeah, thank you. All right, thank you very much. Thanks for coming. And if you have any question, let me know. Huh? Yeah, I'll be here. I am going to give a seminar today at 2:30. Yep. Thank you. Thanks.
I'd like to thank I'm not a expert in this area. My area is environmental economics, but I enjoyed a lot and learned a lot from presentations.
Sure.
Sir,
Yeah, that's fine.
so please,